Hello. The review of the day is The Magic Toyshop by Angela Carter. Such a beautiful name, isn't it? The Magic Toyshop. It sounds all pastoral and cutesy and fun. Might even be in a young adult. It might be something that T.J. Klune wrote after The House on the Cerulean Sea did so well. Replete with happily representational characters, with a ending that is full of joy. But then you read that the author is Angela Carter, and you know that while there may be cute and there may be joy, there's going to be a lot more that makes your spine shudder. And so it is with The Magic Toyshop. So we start with our protagonist, Melanie. Melanie is 15, teenage girl. And we have this slow build of her life. Her life is in this lovely, at least 2-story house in the country. Her father is a famous author, and he and her mother currently on tour in America. Melanie and her two younger siblings, her sister Victoria and her brother Jonathan, are being cared for in the house by a housekeeper who's been hired for the purpose. With Angela Carter, it will always be the writing that draws you in, or it is going to be the writing that will put you off. You have to enjoy the writing as its own organic, lush, often vicious, often just plain odd thing. It is its thing, and the language and the writing is what makes the story or breaks it for you. Now, Carter's been called a whole heap of different things, but one of the things that the Magic Toyshop is registered as is horror. It's also called gothic. It's occasionally called a classic. Magic realism, any of those. Tick your box, go ahead and read. It doesn't really much matter. And so feminism is another thing that Angela Carter is often registered as, and in the early chapters, Melanie is our world. Melanie is her own world. She has got that entirely self-obsessed attitude towards everything that a teenage girl can. And she's in the process of finding out herself, who she is, what she is. And there's an element of sexuality to this book that may upset some readers. But it is, to anyone who has been a young girl, there are slivers of self-awareness penetrating Melanie's world that are very, very intuitive. Small things impinge on her world. The housekeeper makes a lot of pudding. I've never had a bread pudding, I don't think. Oh well, I read a lot about them here. One glorious night, Melanie can't sleep. And she goes into her parents' room, they're away, and through this expedition we see so many things about her and her life. Importantly, we view her mother, the photograph of their wedding that her mother keeps on the mantelpiece. There's her father's relatives, who we hear that they haven't been seeing as much of since her father became rich and famous author. And her mother's sole relative is her brother, who is Philip, Melanie's Uncle Philip, who she has never met. He's standing there dour and refusing to smile even for his only sister's wedding day. Melanie is in that dreamy state that you can achieve quite easily when you're a teenager, and she looks at her mother's wedding gown in the photo. She goes to the crate where it's saved. She pulls it and the veil and the wreath out and dresses herself up in it, and then goes for a walk in the garden. This is magical realism and just plain fantasy magic. It is exotically written, and it is amazing. While she's out there in the garden, the house locks behind her, locking her out in the night in the garden that had previously seemed so welcoming but now seems so horrific, and Melanie ends up climbing the apple tree in order to get back into her room. During this process, the wreath from the wedding gown gets hooked on one of the upper branches of the apple tree, And the dress itself gets destroyed and covered with blood as Melanie is scratched. And being past the tree climbing age, she hurts herself getting back in. Next morning, one of the first things that happens is that Melanie is handed a telegram from America saying that her parents have died. And in her own head, the guilt for the wedding gown episode mutates into personal responsibility for her parents dying. And I think that in child psychology and teenage psychology, this is a very relevant and comprehensible thing that does happen. Children seek to find meaning, and if the only meaning they can find is blaming themselves for something out of their control, then they'll do that. This early part of the novel is both wonderful and horrifying, largely from the sense of impending doom that hangs over you the whole time. So following this, Melanie and her two younger siblings are sent to live with the very Uncle Philip who wouldn't smile for his sister's wedding. And they're met at the station by his wife's two brothers. His wife and her two brothers all live together with Uncle Philip in his toy shop. Philip is a toy maker. And we're already given that sense that this too will be impending doom in the fact that the only toy that Melanie has ever had from him was a Jack-in-the-Box when she was very young, carved with her own face, and she found it so horrific that her mother ended up throwing it out. So here they are in this house. Now, because Melanie was so young and just discovering who she really was, who the voice inside her head is, her own sexuality, her own reality in the world, because she was just experiencing that, when she's thrown into this rather horrific household, her sense of self dissolves in many ways and she can feel herself being lost. In this house, she finds out that her aunt Margaret is dumb. Apparently she lost her voice on her wedding night. Threatening or what? She communicates through having a series of blackboards and notebooks, but she can't really chat. The Uncle Philip never addresses a single word to any of the children or even admits that they're even there, until the point where he realizes that Jonathan, Melanie's younger brother, loves carving, likes making model ships, at which point he absorbs him into the toy making side, and Melanie feels that if she ever had had her brother, she has now lost him. The baby, Victoria, is claimed by Aunt Maggie, who has obviously always wanted a baby but never had one. And there's this cold house with no hot running water, no real toileting facilities. The food is grim, the house is cold, it's miserable. Philip won't allow any sort of joyousness. And the two brothers are odd, they are strange. At various points during this year, I wonder, are they real people or are they manifests of magical toy making? This book keeps you wondering about what is actually happening. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. Now, one of the ideas I've always loved, and it's attributed to Alfred Hitchcock, though I don't believe it is, and if you know where it comes from, do let me know, is the idea that all you need for horror is an isolated protagonist in a scary situation. And this is very much the horror of this book. Melanie is entirely isolated inside her own head, and she didn't even really know the inside of her own head when she went there. So what is a normality? What isn't normality? It's being lost upon her. Now, a more modern book may seek to emphasize the escape. They may make Melanie a strong, powered individual who's going to escape by going to the library, the police, to anyone. But this book isolates her within the house to an extent where her own self starts to become immolated. At least that all of this is how I read it, by the way. I'm sure Angela Carter's been taught in literature courses. I'm sure there's a whole heap of different interpretations. Anyhow, so I feel personally that Angela Carter is horror pared down to the bone. The majority of the novel, nothing actually happens per se and as such, except this lush, beautiful, descriptive writing. But at the same time, every word feels as if it's calculated and carefully positioned to set the reader on edge. This was an edge of your seat type read. and shivers up your spine. At times, I got that feeling of something crawling on your skin so that you have to put down the book, move away and do something else. It upsets and unsettles you on a page-by-page basis without you ever being able to point out why. No clowns jump out of drains, and let's just admit clowns are scary in any case. No ghosts jump out of cupboards. No slithery thing is under the bed. But all of these things seem almost friendly compared to this strange cold house with these strange people who don't behave in any way that Melanie can understand, and how Melanie is starting to become one of them. Incredibly isolated for the first part of it, she starts to feel more part of the group in the later part, and even that is horrifying. The isolation isn't the same, but the way that Melanie is being subsumed into their reality is. So, having bypassed most common themes of horror with these metaphorical flights of weird, visceral strangeness, Angela goes straight for the adrenaline glands, and I found it exhaustingly excellent. It's draining in the extreme, and you need to lose yourself in the writing to become the horror, and then it will creep into you. That's how I read it. Other people may just read it for its beautiful, beautiful literary value, which is undoubted. Now I'm going to read a tiny, tiny little bit. Most of this novel takes place in the same house, and that's Uncle Philip's house. But there is one brief excursion where she goes out for a walk with one of the two brothers, which is terrifying in itself. As a reader, you want to go, no, no, run, don't do it. But, you know, let's see, what is the best part of this? Ah, yes. This is a description of the suburb. It was a high and windy suburb. The square, its shabby focus, topped a steep hill, and these streets ran sharply down. Once stately and solid streets, fat with money and leisure, full of homes for secure middle class with parlours, in which its bustled daughters could play the last rose of summer, and believe me of all those endearing young charms, politely, on rosewood pianos, antlered with candlesticks, and roast beef coloured dining rooms where the gentlemen mellowed over rich after-dinner port, and mahogany reflected ox roasting coal fires tended by black flocks of housemaids. And now, crumbling in decay, overladen with a desolate burden of humanity, the houses had the look of queuing for a great knacker's yard, of eagerly embracing the extinction of their former grandeur, of offering themselves to ruin with an abandonment almost luxurious. Yet there were still trees, planed in the good old days, and one could see a great deal of sky. It was an airy, almost woodsy, unhappy place, with hardly any traffic. That's the writing. And if you're going to like Angela Carter, it's almost certainly going to be for the writing, because the writing is superb. Now let's talk about the book. This is what I'd normally talk about in the beginning, but the book isn't, the actual novel itself is kind of secondary to the story. It should always be, but in this case, definitely. Okay, so I've got this beautiful edition. It is slightly embossed here on the wheels and keys that represent the toy maker. You've got those swans making an interesting Baroque, Art Deco perhaps, pattern. And you've got those three triangles. It continues around. And inside the covers, you have got this extra beautiful patterning, front and back. And all of this glory is because it's a Virgo Modern Classic 40th anniversary. And there's a whole heap of other books. There must be at least 13 books published for the anniversary. And if they're as beautiful as this one, I kind of want them. But, you know, those of us who know Virgo Modern Classics are more familiar with this green cover with a classic painting on it. And that is echoed in this book only by the spine, which has the same green. Virgo Modern Classics aimed to bring more women authors and more books written by women authors into the public domain, and they've done a great job. In terms of publishers that I actually recognize, that is one of the publishers that I've always been enthused by, because they have brought several books that I would never have heard of otherwise to me. The introduction to this book for this 40th edition is always interesting, or is also interesting. It's by Carmen Khalid, 2007. I believe that she was one of the people who first started Virago Modern Classics. And she was a friend of Angela Carter. She apparently was present at her funeral and spoke there. And part of that is in the introduction. She also talks about Angela Carter as herself, as a person, and brings a bit more dimensionality to an author who was really quite extraordinary. The Magic Toyshop is, I believe, her second book. I think it's got a freshness and youth to it that maybe aren't quite there in some of her later books that become more and more cynical and more, not harsh, mature. Let's go with mature. They become more and more mature, but this one is more magical in its youth, I'm going to say. Beautifully written. Angela Carter was earlier on a supporter for Virago Modern Classics as well. She gave them a book, one of the first books they published, not the first, I believe. And she gave it to them for peanuts, because while she liked money, she wanted to support the publishing house. So, thoroughly recommend The Magic Toyshop. Thoroughly recommend Angela Carter. It's not everyone's idea of horror, but I think it certainly does belong in that category. It also belongs strongly in literature, and there is a wide audience, I believe, for this book. I would not say everyone. I would not say that everyone who likes horror is going to like this book. But I think most people who do enjoy the writing for its own writing's sake, as it were, are going to really love her prose. And if not this book, maybe try another Angela Carter. Thank you very much for watching. Read good books.